here. Hello and welcome today.
Hi, hello.
Today we have Red Elders, and she is offering a brand new, very exciting course. Red, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to chatting about it.
Yeah, do you want to tell everyone what your course is about a bit?
So it's called Somatic Sorcery, and it's kind of an experiment really for me to sort of try and bring two branches of my work that I've been involved in together, really. And I've got a big history in body work and movement work and that kind of thing. And more recently, I've become a full-time artist. And it's kind of about exploring where the crossover of those things are, about how we use our bodies to get into creative spaces and flow states. And in those places also to have the possibility to connect with something otherworldly, which is perhaps, again, where this crossover for the sorcery work comes into it.
Absolutely. It sounds like quite an enticing course. Maybe before we launch into more about the specifics, could you tell us a bit about yourself as a practitioner, just so we have a bit of a frame of reference for where you're coming from? What type of path are you on?
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
So I guess for the majority of my adult life, I've been exploring Eastern spiritual traditions and meditative practices. Maybe like 25 years ago, I studied for 7 years with an old Taoist teacher, and did a lot of work around internal energy work and movement meditation practices, which was really powerful, really amazing.
Beautiful.
And then from there, I kind of ventured into all sorts of different Buddhist practices, Eastern sort of Vipassana meditation practices. So I've always had a pathwork of meditation practice going on, but it's manifested in all sorts of different ways. And then right until, maybe even 6 years or so ago, when I discovered Tibetan Buddhism, and I was working quite heavily in a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but increasingly feeling a little bit uncomfortable that it was Tibetan and it wasn't, like my own people's practices. And just about the same time, I was doing a lot of ancestral healing work and really being guided through that work back to explore, what are the practices and the spiritual ways of my own people, my own ancestors. And then I came across Robin Artison's work, who's also a teacher at the Blackthorne School, you all know, and which was really helpful in giving me a framework for, the old ways of the British Isles. And that really brought me, right back to where I started from with my own work and practices, but discovering this whole Western spirituality and Western esotericism, which I had no idea about at all. So I've been learning as much as possible this past maybe 5 or 6 years about that, and finding immensely powerful in just coming back to my own roots, and the work of my own people has been much more profound and been much more powerful for me than it's kind of like roundabout circuitous route that I took to get here. So
yes, that sounds quite juicy, building upon this foundation in Eastern practices and then really going back to your roots and to some more ancestral type work perhaps, and really being able to see the beauty of mysticism within a more Western tradition.
Definitely. Yeah.
So for those who aren't familiar with the terminology, what is somatic sorcery and how did you become interested in it? I mean, you touched on that already, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a phrase that's sort of arisen more recently out of the work that I'm doing, because So I do a lot of body work and movement practices myself, just as part of my own way of finding my own peace and connection to something other anyway. And I started incorporating some of those into the practice I was doing through what I was discovering in Western esotericism. And then particularly as I started doing more and more artwork, I was finding that was a really good way to prepare to be in creative spaces. And I realized that, you know, whenever I'm doing an artwork, like at least 50% of the artwork is in the preparations that I'm doing beforehand that people aren't seeing anything about. And I was occasionally, for some reason, I felt to sometimes video these movement practices I was doing out on the land, kind of to, just for myself really, just to kind of observe, to witness myself, like a self-witnessing practice. And then I started posting a few of them here and there on social media, and people were asking, well, you know, what the hell are you doing there? What is that? And I realized that it's maybe quite an important thing for me to start putting that part of it into words, because that's kind of how I get into creative flow states. It's how I connect with other beings, other spirits. And people seem really quite interested in that aspect. So here's how somatic sorcery arose from that.
I think it's absolutely critical, essential, profound. I think using the body as a sorceress tool, and maybe that doesn't even give it the honor it deserves, but I think that it's an integral part of becoming a fully embodied and empowered sorcerers, learning how to use the body as well as the mind in your working. And I do think this sort of work in particular is a profound gift in these modern times for us. I think we've really become disembodied in a lot of ways. So much of our modern life requires us to be in our heads all the time and be more and more disconnected from the visceral, the physical. And I find that this work is especially indicated for those of us who are practitioners.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I mean, it's one of the things that I talk about in the first week of the course, is how, you know, we all do probably a lot of reading and lots of theorizing and, you know, just imagining about things. But for me, I like to kind of flip it all around and do the practices first and then theorize about them afterwards. So
that's a wise approach.
Yeah, well, the course I've developed is it's going to be much more experience based. We'll be kind of getting people hopefully out of the whole, you know, reading and analyzing and trying to conceptualize things and get into the raw, real, lived experience of it first, and then see what people have to say about it afterwards.
Get them out of the armchair and into the wilds, is what you say.
Because yeah, it's, I mean, for me, a key concept that I explore is that our thought processes and our movement processes are like so totally interwoven. And for me, if you change the way that people move or give them other options to explore in their range of movements, then it also opens up the possibility for new ways of thinking or new ways of being or new ways of relating to other in this world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, you know, we're all quite used to, myself included, sitting at a seat at a desk all day long. You know, even in my drawing practices, I sit for like 9 hours at a time in one position sometimes, and that can become a really rigid and fixed way of being in the whole world. So it's good to just get up and shake that out a little bit and
absolutely
have some new pathways in the body.
It's no secret, I've been fascinated for a long time with the mind-body connection, and my studies of psychology really play into that. But I really do find it fascinating how moving your body can literally help you process emotions, and it can help change the way you view yourself and the world. I think we've only scratched the very tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding that. And I think as practitioners, we are maybe more on the cutting edge of this than a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. And I found that, I think, having done various different kinds of meditation practices, from, having to stay completely still for 10 hours in one day in a Vipassana retreat, for example, to, contemplating emptiness in a Zen Buddhist retreat, to then doing movement practices. For me, it was when I started doing meditative movement practices and journeying inwards into those spaces that things really opened up or unlocked in a way that hadn't been possible before. And I found that similarly in group movement spaces that I've run, in workshops that I've run. I'll take people through a guided meditation exercise, and everyone will be seated, and there'll be one experience that people have. But then as soon as we get people up and moving with the guided meditation too, it's almost like, the doors come wide open, and there seems to be a much greater possibility for other things to happen, or, magic to happen.
Yeah, it can really be a catalyst.
Yeah.
So seeing how profoundly this has affected you, I have ideas about what drew you to offer this particular course versus something else.
Yeah, well, it was, again, coming out of the artwork that I've been doing. I wasn't interested particularly in offering a course, but people started asking me to teach them to draw. And I've never been to art school, so I don't know the kind of traditional proper skills for drawing, and I felt a little bit out of my depth in doing that. But people were being quite persistent about wanting me to teach them something. And so, yeah, I was looking at, as I mentioned, I was looking at the practices that I was doing around the drawing, and realized that, that's so fundamental and key. Like, if I'm not doing those practices, I'm not in the right space, and the drawing doesn't happen. So it's like, that seemed like the interesting, important part of it to me. And so I just said to people, well, I can't teach you to draw, but I can teach you maybe how to get into the right frame of mind and body, and to open yourself to be in that creative space. Would that be of interest? And I had a resounding yes to that. So
So delicious. What type of student do you feel will be a good fit for your course in this style of practice?
yeah, I mean, the obvious one is people who are doing some creative work themselves, whether they're artists like me, or writers, or performers in any way. But it's not just limited to those kind of people. It's basically anybody who just wants to have maybe a little bit more inspiration, or possibility, or anybody who wants to feel more grounded and centered in themselves, or know a bit more about who they truly are in the world. Anybody who's interested in creative flow states, or I think maybe also quite a bit of the things I'll be teaching will be about how to have choices over how we are moved by our emotions in the world, and dipping in and out of emotions and emotional expression. Anybody who's interested in trance states, coming in and out of trance states, bringing anything of value back from those places. So basically everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good for just about anybody.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about your journey as an artist and how that weaves into your practice?
Yeah, I was just writing about this week actually on my Instagram.
Oh,
How I haven't actually been an artist continuously the whole time at all. There's not been time for it. I'm a mother of 2 children, and that takes up a lot of time and energy.
absolutely.
So art has always been kind of in the background, and hasn't really ever had much chance for full expression, except for 2 times before this current period that's happening. And each of those times was in a time of major transition in my life, when I was, completely leaving one whole identity in many ways and moving into another one. In those transition periods, then my drawings seem to just emerge and arise and really carry me through those interstices. And Yeah, now it's only really been lately that I've looked back and realized, oh, that's what's been going on in those times. So there were two major transitions that I went through, and each time drawing arose. And then as soon as I got settled again, the drawings kind of dissipated. I was busy, living my life after that. Although I think during the times that drawings weren't so present, then there were other ways that that creativity was manifesting. So I went through a period of writing quite a lot, which seemed to slot in more easily to having children around somehow. So yes, I think it wasn't until, so my last major period of drawing was about 6 years ago. And then when I got settled into a new home that I was waiting to move into, the drawing stopped again. And I didn't draw again for another 3 years. And then I was doing Robin Artison's Ascion course with the Blackthorne School 2.5 years ago. And as part of the work there, Robin asked us to make a drawing of Hecate. He invited us to do that as part of the practices in one moment. And I thought, oh, I haven't drawn anything for so long, how's it going to be? Is that going to, let's just give it a go. I'll see how it is. Maybe it won't work. And I sat down and to my amazement, quite a lovely drawing of Hecate just flowed out so easily and quickly. And it was incredibly powerful because it came to remind me in many ways that, oh, you look, this is who you are. You can do this easily. This is what you're here for in many ways.
Wow.
It was like speaking to me, really.
It's a profound drawing, if I'm thinking of the correct one.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was just, it's funny because I look back at it now and it looks quite simple because that started my next period of drawing, which has now gone on for 2.5 years. So if I look then at the Hecate that I did 18 months later, which is much more developed, having then been drawing for that time, that feels much better. And the first one seems quite like a little sketch, but I can also see the beauty and the simplicity of it. And because it seemed to come to tell me to get back into drawing again, it will always be quite a special drawing for me, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so since then I've been drawing ever since, because of course the pandemic came along and then I couldn't do any of my movement or body work or group workshop spaces at all. So it was lucky that I had actually been laying the foundations for 6 months maybe previously, because then I kind of had it was like I'd been kindling a small fire and then it was easily able to just, throw some wood on it and get it going, really blazing.
Absolutely. And it really, I mean, it fed you quite literally during the pandemic. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, literally. I mean, I
Mhm.
lost all my income and had no other money coming in, and with rent and bills to pay and children to
Yeah.
feed. So yeah, thank goodness for art and for the voices
Mm.
of the gods telling me to get back into it.
Yes, I just see this beautiful, being carried by your spirits through this and being shown what you needed right at exactly the best time.
Definitely, I feel very fortunate and humbled really by that process, how it arose.
Yeah. But so I hope it's okay to share, you're located in the UK. Do you, I mean, since this path is from the UK, well, in terms of the tradition we've been discussing of British traditional witchcraft, or I don't know what you would prefer to call it, as a Western esoteric practice, do you have any local places that especially call to you that you feel comfortable sharing, and what make them special to you in your practice?
Sure. So until about 6 years ago, I was first of all living for 9 years in a particular area of woodland, living really quite closely to the land there in an off-grid shed in the woods, no electricity, quite remote. And I really built long and deep relations with that place in the woods. I mean, I literally birthed my babies there. You know, the trees were like watching over while I was there. So I've got quite a deep connection with that place. And still
Wow.
now I don't get to go back there. Sadly, I had to leave there, and there was quite a grief associated with leaving that. I hadn't realized
Mhm.
how you know how bound into place we can become when we start honoring it and you know involving it in practices and things like that. Um,
Absolutely. I relate a lot to that.
yeah, it was hard to leave the place itself, and I don't go back there in any major way very often. But when I do, it is like going back to an old friend. You know, I feel that kind of
Mm.
warm, enveloping hold of the place, kind of welcoming me back in. So there's that place. That will always be very much special in my heart. It's not that far away. It's still quite close by. But then since then, I moved further near to the coast where I am. There's wild expanses of quite untouched salt marsh here.
Mm.
It's very tidal, so twice a day the salt marsh fills, all the creeks fill up with water and then empty out again. So it's got this beautiful rhythm to the landscape there. You know, sometimes you can go
Wow.
and the tide is all the way out and there's just a lot of sand and a huge expanse of space. Other times you'll go on a high tide and the entire area has just disappeared and it's just pure water everywhere. So
Mm.
it's a very liminal space. You know, it's neither land nor sea. It's both several times of the day. So and there's one particular spot that I've always been attracted to ever since I moved to Norfolk, which is 15 years ago now. I've been going to this particular place, and it's a really special sacred place. I try to go there once a week at least, just to take a walk out there, just to make some offering, it's a good place to process and release any emotional things I might be carrying myself, because I can walk quite far out. There's nobody else around except for some seals maybe on a distant shore with their mournful cries. And it's a good place to shout and bellow and scream, or strip off my
Mm.
clothes and run around naked, or you know, it's kind of quite a wild and free place where I know, even though it's a big open space, I know I can feel quite undisturbed there. It's quite interesting.
That's
Um,
lovely. I think we don't have enough opportunities to let loose and do anything from, screaming in a way that won't get
it's
someone very concerned about us, and to
it's
all kinds of different practices.
exactly. I realize how fortunate I am to have that space, because you know, I know again through running group spaces, people will come to my groups and I'll maybe encourage some kind of you know outward expression of releasing of tensions and things, and people, you know, they're not quite used to it, not necessarily just because they're not used to it, but because they don't have the space for it. Because if they do it, you know, in their apartment at home, then it's going to bother the neighbors, or you know, those kind of things. So yeah, I realize it's quite a privilege, I think, to have such a space. But there are also other ways to work with that kind of thing, which I can touch upon in the course as well. So
Oh,
and
wonderful.
also you don't have to all just be bellowing and shrieking to process emotions either. There are other ways to do it.
Absolutely. I think, just being able to express whatever it is you need to express. And sometimes it's loud and strong energy, and other times it's soft and subtle, and just having enough safety and space to be able to express it all is a profound gift.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's again, I mean, that's kind of part of who I am as a therapeutic practitioner. So there'll be aspects of that kind of thing woven into the course, I think, which is, I think, a lot of the time, maybe our bodies or our whole perceptions aren't picking up on some of the finer or more subtler signals in the system, or because we've got accumulations of whatever it is, energetic stuff, to use a technical
Mhm.
phrase, you know, whether it's like trauma or whether it's unprocessed emotions, whatever, there's just kind of like stuff in our bodies. So I'll be guiding people through safe ways to explore those and express them too. So
Wonderful. And to clarify, your healing modality is massage therapy, correct?
Yeah, I mean, again, I've trained in various different things. I trained as a body psychotherapist.
Oh, okay.
Uh, the full term is a process-oriented Reichian body psychotherapist, but nobody knows what that
Okay.
means. So I just say body psychotherapist.
Yeah.
But then I also trained in different kinds of holistic massage work, deep body work, releasing work, trauma release
Wonderful.
things. And then
I
again,
wish we lived closer so I could go to you. Sounds wonderful.
yeah, and it's fascinating work, you know, and again, it goes hand in hand with the drawings in many cases, especially if I've spent, you know, many hours or days just poring over one drawing, and then it's really nice to have an actual real physical bodywork client to come and, you know, lay my hands on their body and connect with another being and feel into all of the stories that are happening in their bodies. And it's a really nice counterbalance to those hours of just doing two-dimensional work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm.
I see how they both really support the other.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Red. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm just kind of excited about the whole course, really. It's the first time I've ever offered an online course, so I'm kind of curious myself as to how it's going to turn out and what's going to happen. It feels like
Yes.
when I've sat down to record the materials, it feels like I've got so much more that I want to say than maybe we have time to cover. So I think the hardest part for me is kind of holding back, you know, and trying to figure out what's going to be the sort of, we've got 7 weeks, so what are going to be like the 7 useful basic nuggets that I can kind of, you know, encapsulate for people, for them to take with them. So
Well, maybe you can file the rest of the things away and we'll see what could happen
yeah,
in the
definitely.
future. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I'm excited. And, you know, as always with these kind of courses, it's always the people who come on board and are willing to take part and share and, you know, offer their own experiences that make these things so special. And so I'm really looking forward to that and finding out who's along with us and who everybody else is.
Mhm. Most definitely. Well, we're absolutely thrilled to have you on board as an instructor. We're so excited to offer your course, Somatic Sorcery, for those who didn't catch it. And I'm Calahn de la Luna with Red Elders here, the instructor for our upcoming course, Somatic Sorcery. Thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, Red.
Thanks a lot. Bye.